Kia ora, no mai, welcome to The Elephant. I'm Miriam Makamo.
And I'm Mark Kreisel. There's an elephant in the room and we need to talk about it.
Wherever we have a law, we're reducing someone's freedom. Speech can be harmful in all sorts of ways.
I remember going to the Posey Parker protest and I was spat on. I had my hair pulled. It's like, I think hate speech really creates a really horrible image.
We know there's horrible speech out there, but the best antidote is not a law, it's counter-speech.
I've got to come in straight away that this is the worst and this is the most outmoded idea that the free speech absolutists have. The Christchurch mosque shooter had very corrosive, dangerous ideas. There's no amount of counter-speech to him that would have stopped him.
Do you think that by making these things illegal, they disappear? Or do they go further online, further underground, become more toxic?
Today, we're speaking freely about free speech and asking where's the line between free speech and hate speech and who gets to draw it?
The most basic definition of freedom of speech is the liberty to express opinions and ideas without hindrance and especially without fear of punishment.
But in New Zealand, it's a bit more complicated and nuanced than that.
And that's why it's on the front line of just about every battle in the culture wars.
You call Trump's administration a neo-fascist movement, you lunatic. People have gone out.
You're absolutely right.
You have gone out.
No, let me make the case.
I mean, we like to think that we can say what we like. Then someone actually does, and suddenly everyone is furious.
So now, can you sit down? I would like you to remain part of the debate. Well, there's a kind of farcical to quit a debate where we're literally debating about the importance of free speech.
Free speech warriors say cancel culture is killing debate, which is one of the reasons that we set up The Elephant. Others say some of this speech is just bullying with bigger words.
Sometimes it feels as if everyone's claiming they're the ones being silenced, or my personal favourite, deplatformed.
I got cancelled before cancel even had a culture.
Universities should be where we talk about tough ideas. Instead, some students claim they're too scared to speak. Others say universities are too scared to let them speak. Everyone is scared and no one is talking.
Look at what happened when Don Brash of Hobson's Pledge stood up to speak at Auckland University in a debate on, ironically, free speech.
You don't want to debate the issues. You just want to shout your opponents down. And that's what this motion is about. BC culture shuts down free speech.
US Conservative activist Charlie Kirk was speaking at a university when he was shot. He campaigned for zero limits on speech, no hate speech laws at all.
I believe the truth, when allowed to be heard and spread, will be able to defend itself, and it does something to your soul.
But after Charlie Kirk was shot, the US government revoked visas from people who publicly celebrated his death. So even the country where free speech is enshrined in the Constitution, it is figuring out its own boundaries.
So when you see someone celebrating Charlie's murder, call them out. And hell, call their employer.
Here, the law says you can express yourself, write a spicy column, make a rude meme, call the government clowns, all legal.
You were earlier saying that Chris Luxon doesn't necessarily believe the things he's saying.
He's an absolute imbecile.
But that is...
There are limits. You can't defame someone or incite violence here.
You also can't direct hate at anyone over their colour, race, ethnicity and national origin. That's protected.
Online, the rules go further. The Harmful Digital Communications Act of 2015 makes it an offence to post something that's meant to cause harm or is likely to. The penalty, up to $50,000 or 2 years jail.
But here's the gap. There's no protection under the Human Rights Act for any type of hate speech directed at someone over their religion or sexuality. This was illustrated when a West Auckland pastor in July 2017 said he wasn't against gay marriage. This is not very nice, as long as a bullet goes through their head the moment they kiss.
It's just so horrific. It was horrible and hateful. But when police looked at the legislation and sought a legal opinion, they found no criminal offence had been committed.
Meanwhile, it seems the pointy part of this culture war has very much become free speech versus hate speech. And it's based around the trans community.
So remember Posey Parker, the British gender-critical activist whose Auckland rally ended in chaos? Well, protesters drowned her out, one even doused her in tomato juice.
She fled the country, saying New Zealand had lost its moral compass. Supporters of the protest said hate speech has no place here.
Get out of New Zealand with these people. They don't belong here.
Others warned that silencing her, no matter how offensive her views, set a dangerous precedent.
Now there's a new report from the Law Commission, ia tangata, meaning each and every person, and it calls for stronger legal protection for transgender, non-binary and intersex New Zealanders. It wants gender identity and expression written into the Human Rights Act.
It wants gender identity and expression to be prohibited as grounds for discrimination. It does not make any recommendations about reform to hate speech law.
Yeah, critics say it risks chilling free speech.
But supporters say it's nothing about free speech. It's about protecting people in the rainbow community from hate and real harm.
So joining us now is Awa Puna, a filmmaker and actor, and you might have seen her on Shortland Street as well. It's lovely to see you here on The Elephant. Awa, thank you so much for coming to join us. So how important is free speech to you?
Free speech is important, absolutely. And I think, yeah, as soon as free speech becomes hate speech is when it becomes really dangerous for people and harmful for certain communities, especially I think there's been a big rise on this importance of free speech, but yeah, I think hate speech is extremely dangerous.
I mean, that is the point, isn't it? I mean, everybody's talking about free speech and its importance, but where's that line?
Where is the line? And have you suffered hate speech yourself, Awa?
Totally.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I've faced it online. I've faced, comments on the street at school. I can list multiple examples. Like when I was with my partner at the time, and someone rolling down like a car window and being like, "Get away from that thing! It's not a woman," and stuff like that. I'm resilient enough, but I think if there is someone facing that kind of hate all the time, I think it really affects.
What do you say to people say that it's just words, it's actually just free speech? Can it really hurt?
Yeah, it does people, and I think if there's enough of it happening, then it changes kind of a lot of people's rhetoric, and that can lead like a society down to a really scary path.
People can say whatever they like under the law. You can't defame someone. You can't incite violence.
Yeah,
but you can say quite horrific things against another person, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you get censored in any way. Does it feel like it's too loose and the parameters are too wide?
Absolutely. I feel like there are definitely certain groups that perpetuate hate speech as well, again and again. It just has a really awful effect on I think our community. Yeah.
And what about on you though? Do you feel protected or not?
No, not really. I remember going to the Parker protest and I was spat on. I had my hair pulled. I think hate speech really creates a really horrible image.
How difficult is it for you to talk about this in public?
I think it is quite difficult, and it brings up a lot. It does bring up a lot for sure.
What sort of things?
I think it just brings up a lot of memories. I just remember after the protest with Destiny's Church in Posey Parker, I remember going into a really dark place, and it really hurt. It was beautiful because I realized how many people were there to support our community and saw us as human, but it was also really painful seeing how many people didn't think that we deserve human rights. And
well, what would you say to those people who aren't listening to you? But what would you say to them?
Honestly, I would just really drive home that we're all human and we all deserve human rights. And I think hate speech is really has a really negative impact on our rangatahi, and it sends them to dark places. And sometimes you've got to just ask yourself the difference between someone wanting to be here or not. Like it's really important. And I think hate speech can definitely lead people down that path.
Well, thank you so much for coming in. I know this has been such a difficult conversation for you because it brings up so much of the abuse that you have had to suffer over your entire lifetime. And so it's no small thing. We recognise it that you've come in here to talk about it.
Thank you so much. Kia ora. I appreciate it.
So can you have free speech without hate speech? Or is it just one or the other? Joining us now in the studio is Nathan Sauli with Pillar, but you were formerly with the Free Speech Union?
Yes, indeed.
And Paul Fistol from Rights Aotearoa.
Indeed.
And also down the line, we've got Professor Simon Keller, who is a political philosopher who helped write Victoria University's free speech policy. It's so great to have all of you in here. Thank you so much for joining us on The Elephant.
Okay, guys, we'll start with you, Nathan. Where do you draw the line between free speech and hate speech, and who gets to decide?
That's the big question and the big dilemma, isn't it? Speech is so important in our society. Freedom of speech is so important. It's led us to some of our greatest innovations and discoveries and inventions. Hate speech is a popular trend that's thrown around a lot lately, but hate we know is so subjective. What you hate might be different to what I hate, might be different to what somebody else hates. We have very clear legal thresholds within our law currently that define what is and isn't allowed in terms of speech legally and illegally. So things like incitement to violence, defamation, libel, those things would be objective standards of legally restricted speech. But everything else is fair play. So what is free speech? It should be quite a high threshold in order for us to progress some really controversial topics, some areas that we're not sure about as a society, and in order for us to progress philosophically, but also practically.
So you don't think we need any changes to our law settings to protect people?
I think if we look abroad right now, New Zealand is doing extremely well legislatively. I don't think we need to follow the likes of the UK, where there's been 12,000 arrests this year for social media posts. We don't need to follow the likes of, for a more extreme example, somewhere like China or Iran, where the state dictates what are appropriate and allowed to talk about topics on the table. So no, I think we should leave it where it is.
I completely disagree with Nathan's assertion that hate is subjective. There are many European countries that have workable hate speech laws, and hate speech is a corrosive force on the dignity of both individuals and groups. Hate speech says, you don't belong here in this society. Your democratic participation is worth less than other people's.
Well, you've said that hate is not subjective. That would imply it's objective. We've just saw that judges who are trusted by society through study, through prudence, through attaining a certain status in society, that they are the people entrusted with subjective discretion when it comes to sentencing.
No, they are trusted, sorry to get all legal, but they are trusted with interpreting the law and the framework of the law. And the Sentencing Act very clearly says when hate is an aggravating feature for a crime. And judges interpret that just as juries
interpret again.
Why do we need to change the law then if the judges are getting it right?
Because there's no hate speech laws. There's no effective hate speech law in New Zealand. We have Section 61 of the Human Rights Act, which hasn't been updated since 1993 and needs to be.
Yeah, I think there are very few laws, if any, that we can say can be interpreted objectively. If by objectively we mean without expert judgment, which different people will see in different ways. So many of our laws, for example, depend on judging people's intentions or judging what counts as harm. And all of these are things that people will legitimately disagree on because they have different sort of ethical or psychological sort of theories in the background. So even setting a threshold, even saying, we have to set a threshold between free speech and hate speech, I think sort of misrepresents things. Wherever we have a law, we're reducing someone's freedom. And freedom, speech can be harmful in all sorts of ways. It's also really, really, really important to protect in all sorts of forms.
Indeed. And just to complete the circle, the best working definition of what hate speech is is the one that the Germany has adopted and other European. And think of it like group defamation. So we're all part of groups. We're Christian or Jewish or Muslim, or we're gay or trans. And if someone says something which libels that group as a group and tries to say, aha, you don't belong here in society. You have less inherent dignity as a group than other people. That's hate speech.
That's an interesting point. I mean, the West Auckland pastor who threatened, who talked about he was only pro-gay marriage if they had a bullet in the head. The police, there was nothing to prosecute him for that. What did you think about that?
Well, that's because groups don't have rights. Individuals have rights. Groups and organisations do not have rights. The law protects individuals. The law is subjective, but we trust those judges in those esteemed positions to make subjective discretion decisions. So that's the argument why we shouldn't have something like hate speech laws, because we can't clearly define it. It is in the eye of the beholder. And it is really, really hard when we started trying to apply rights to groups as opposed to reading the situation of the individual and carrying that.
I need to push back on that. Yeah. I need to push back straight away.
So, I mean, let's summon it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that can be the thing that it has to depend on, because someone could say exactly the same thing about free speech. Someone could say, look, in order to define what exactly counts as speech and exactly what forms of speech we should take to be free, well, that is a judgment. It's not objective, and therefore it shouldn't be in the law. But of course, you're not going to say that because you're a big believer in the right to free speech, as you should be.
Now, I just want to push back on this: groups don't have rights. Well, in the law, there's a very basic distinction between individuals and corporations. Corporations are groups of people, and corporations very much have rights. So that's a spurious argument.
Response? I would say organisations are held to standards legally, but they don't have rights in the same way that individuals have rights and that are realised in terms of human right law.
In terms of, say, like the trans community, which hate speech, they say can do you accept, can do real harm to them?
I would never sit here and say that words don't hurt feelings. I'm not a believer that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words are ultimately one of the most powerful things in our world. They do carry weight, but it is all on the basis of subjective interpretation and how you perceive it happening to you.
Okay, Nathan, how is ia tangata going to change things?
Well, it's not. In my opinion, it should come out and outright write it off altogether. It was commissioned by the previous administration and has only just come to fruition now. As the Human Rights Act stands, there's 13 clear categories for what would be considered protected classes on the basis of discrimination. And they already serve the purpose. Adding a protected group would carve out a two-tier law system.
What would that mean, though, to our free speech? How would that affect it? Well, I could say to you, for example.
It would affect the conversations that we could have in the report, and it talks about misgendering and dead naming, which are common terms in the transgender community, and it talks about the want to protect them legally from those things. Now, a lot of these things happen very unintentionally, but they also, by restricting those things legally, would infringe on other people's freedom of conscience and religion to object from participating in someone else's chosen identity like that.
So I'm picking you don't agree with that.
I think that's quite a mischaracterization of the ia tangata report. It's got nothing to do with free speech whatsoever. In fact, the Law Commission went way out of their way to put dead naming and misgendering to aside. At the very simplest, it's about this question: is it okay to discriminate against transgender, non-binary and intersex people?
So, Paul, you say it's gone away from those terms. Does it outline those terms specifically in the issue paper?
What do you mean?
Dead naming and misgendering.
But that is not the focus.
It's not the focus, but acknowledges that it could be a relative cost.
But
what is dead naming?
It's when you use a person's dead name.
Oh, I see.
When they've changed gender, changed names.
If the ia tangata report was adopted in its fullness, you could stand on Lambton Quay and dead name someone and it wouldn't be a criminal offence.
Nathan?
I disagree. The report's very clear and outlines very clearly the effects that it could have on freedom of speech. It goes to great lengths to make those clear. The law's not for affirming people's identities. The law is for protecting individuals. They're already protected under the HRA. No one is advocating for violence against this community. No one is advocating for hatred towards this community.
But if you take the predominance of intersex people in New Zealand, plus all the people who identified as trans and non-binary in the last census, you get somewhere between 2.2 and 3% of the population, depending on how prevalent you think intersex conditions are in the population. That's 3% of New Zealand. I think, what's that, 150,000 people or something, bigger than Palmerston North. They deserve human rights. And And so it comes down those individuals, not a group, those individuals deserve human rights.
Let me just say, though, and this is where this conversation often gets, no one is denying the existence of these people. I know many transgender people. I've talked to many transgender people.
You're denying that they should have human rights.
I'm not denying they should have human rights. I'm saying that the human rights are already enshrined and protected by the laws that currently exist without creating a new set of laws that protect the group.
So you believe in the Crown Law 2006 opinion?
No, what I'm saying is the law that, as it exists, protects them as human beings. We don't need to now create caveats that have group rights.
When Parker Posey came to New Zealand, should she be allowed to have spoken?
That's a very interesting question.
Absolutely.
What do you say?
So I just want to...
No, what do you say?
I am also I believe in free speech. I just believe in two more carve-outs. I believe in a hate speech carve-out and a hate speech in that.
So should she have been allowed to have spoken? So we could have understood where she was coming from?
I don't think she should have been allowed to, because she intrinsically says...
Let me explain.
No. She says to those 3% of people, you don't belong in this country. You are lesser citizens. That is what she says.
Never said that. Well, what I'll explain is this.
Well, how do we know if she wasn't allowed to speak?
Well, because you've got a YouTube channel.
What I would say is Paul does not believe in free speech, but he believes in his speech. You can disagree with me. You can tell me, well, everything that I believe is a lie, that it's wrong. But freedom of speech guarantees me four things: the right to speak, the right not to speak. So I'm not compelled, I'm not obligated. The right to listen and the right not to listen, to access information or walk away from speech I disagree with. What Paul is saying here is that only speech that he agrees with or that he believes in should be allowed to happen, especially in the public square. Now, for all of human history, or I shouldn't say all of human history, for all of civilization, Western liberal democracy, we have valued debate and discussion. We have used our words from the time we stopped using stones and spears. Words have been the pathway forward.
And that paradigm no longer applies.
So Paul doesn't believe in freedom of speech. There, he said he doesn't.
No, the paradigm doesn't apply because Elon Musk controls the X algorithm. He can surface.
Elon, what are you doing to us, Elon? Why are you harassing us
to the top?
What is hate speech?
Hate speech is when you say to a group of people, you deserve to belong less in society than another group of people.
Well, look. So there's no easy way to define it. I think the ways people talk about it is to say that it's speech that expresses hatred or incites violence. Yep. And the thing I'd say about that kind of speech is that speech generally, if it incites violence, I mean, I guess unless you're a general going to war or a boxing coach or something, but if it incites violence or it expresses hate, then it probably doesn't serve the deeper purpose of free speech that Nathan just spoke about, which is promoting discussion and debate and getting closer to the truth and trying out different ideas and exchanging reasons. And I think that is a way in which we can start to discriminate, maybe not between free speech and hate speech, but between the kind of speech we should protect and the kind of speech that's not so important to protect.
What is hate speech? Thanks, Simon.
Hate speech is entirely subjective. What's been described here is incitement to violence, which is already described in the law.
Yeah.
No one's advocating for that, but hate speech is subjective.
But don't you find it interesting that I could slag you off or slag your religion off?
Yeah.
And there's no protection under the law for that. And I could, the same goes for Jews, for Muslims. In fact, the Royal Commission after the mosque shootings recommended that we introduce some protections around hate speech.
Again, recommendations that won't be picked up because they are antithetical to what law is supposed to do. The law is to serve and protect individuals through a standard of equality, and we're supposed to have these objective principles, but subjective interpretation can come in from judges.
Personally, Nathan, how would you feel if I slagged off your Lord and Saviour?
It wouldn't bother me in the slightest. Honestly, it wouldn't bother me in the slightest.
Why not?
Because what you have to say about me or what I believe has nothing to do with who I really am and the beliefs that I truly hold.
But Nathan, can't you see that one person who was so infused with the hate and the speech that went with it, that he slaughtered over 50 people in mosques in Christchurch? Surely there needs to be some protection.
The issue of the Christchurch mosque shooting is an extremely powerful one, obviously, and it's very emotive, and it was one of the darkest days in New Zealand history. I remember it very clearly, and no one would ever justify that day through any sort of rational thinking. But it's not rational to now say we should restrict everybody's speech. We should create all these legislative carve-outs for specific groups that will be subjectively interpreted and applied, and that anyone will go through the court system based on how they feel or think it's being applied.
Well, they would just leave them alone, and it's up to them to handle it.
Well, this is the thing, right? There's horrible speech out there. We know this. We know there's horrible speech out there. But the antidote, the best antidote, is not the law. It's counter speech.
I've got to come in straight away that this is the worst, and this is the most outmoded idea that the free speech absolutists have. They believe in what I call the billiard ball theory of knowledge. They believe you believe something. If I come with a bigger billiard ball, I'll knock it out of the speech park. That's just ridiculous. The Christchurch mosque shooter had very corrosive, dangerous ideas. There's no amount of counter speech to him that would have stopped him.
Yeah, I mean, people have different motives, and some people are want to hate, or some people can be brought into a position in which they hate others based on their identities very easily for whatever reason. And to say that, oh, if only we could offer them the arguments, then they'd change their minds, I think is a little naive. I don't think that's how human nature works.
I agree.
Certainly when you go back and look at least some of the major sort of masochists and most horrible things that humans have done, they've been preceded by language that dehumanizes certain people. Now, there is a question of whether making that language illegal would have made things better or worse. I can see that.
Nathan, surely there is some areas that deserve to be protected, some areas of hate speech that even you would agree with.
Incitement to violence, defamation, libel, these are, again, clearly outlined in the law. What I would say is this, and I would appreciate if everyone was honest, do you think that by making these things illegal, they disappear? Or do they go further online, further underground, become more toxic, and they still manifest themselves in these completely terrible acts? I personally would like to know, as much as I can know, about the person who opposes me, the person who criticizes me, the person who thinks one way about me, so that when I engage them, I'm aware of who I'm talking to. I can try and appeal to their rational mind. And some people are not rational. That's what happens when you live on a floating ball in the middle of the galaxy with 5 billion, 7 billion people. We're not always going to agree on everything. In fact, we shouldn't. Disagreement has brought us further than most things. So I would say that creating a law or a carve-out, it doesn't make these things disappear, it makes it less visible.
I disagree with that. So I call that the safety valve theory of free speech absolutism. They believe that it's somehow a safety valve if people can, but once
you release some of the pressure.
But it doesn't release the pressure because we have no functioning hate speech laws in this country. It's impossible to get a conviction under the current case law.
Thank God.
What would be the biggest outcome, do you think, Paul, if we expanded the laws? What would that mean in a practical sense? Just one example.
Do you mean about the Ia Tangata law?
Yeah.
Let's
use Ia Tangata.
It would be fantastic because trans, intersex and non-binary New Zealanders would finally know that the Crown Law 2006 opinion was settled law. Right?
Law is not for the affirmation of people's personal identities, though.
So I don't want to use religious, but I'm going to. But religion is an identity and an ideology. If you're saying that your religious identity isn't to be affirmed by Section 21 of the Human Rights Act, so does that mean I can discriminate against you?
Absolutely.
But that's not how human rights law works in New Zealand.
But again,
it sounds like you're welcoming this.
I'm open to it. You can say whatever you want to me. This freedom.
Not everybody is as robust as you.
I'm
Nathan.
not saying
there are vulnerable communities out there who can't handle that, and surely they need some protection.
So that is the essence of the argument, right? We've got a very small minority of people who have perceived it to be much harder to live life than the vast majority of people throughout history. Therefore, we should put everybody under objective legislation that restricts other people's speech. Freedom of conscience and religion would tell me that I should be able to disagree with Paul and his beliefs around gender-critical thoughts. He would now, moving forward, if this got implemented, have a legal path of recourse to punish me for that.
I think we need to slowly sort of wrap this up. Simon, I'll bring you in here. How do we actually get this balance right?
Well, I can tell you my opinion. I mean, I guess I'm a liberal. I think that our starting position should always be that we make laws and we interfere with people's behaviour only when we have a special justification to do so. But I would also say that free speech is not in any way a fundamental explanation of other human rights. I think that what is fundamental is human dignity and I guess just straight out human happiness and well-being. So I think that the way that we draw the balance is by thinking about the quality of speech. And there are times when we have to say, well, this kind of speech just hurts some people and makes no one better off and is just mischievous or damaging, and therefore it has no justification. But I would also say you need pretty good grounds to make that judgment. If you're unsure, I'd err on the side of permission.
And so we'll come back to our original question. I'll ask you two gentlemen, because you've had the most to say. You've had the most free speech out of all of us.
Yeah.
Can you have free speech without hate speech?
Once again, I'm going to say I believe in 4 carve-outs to free speech absolutism. And they're all subjective, right? They're all subjective. So incitement to violence, that's objective. Defamation, objective. I believe in hate speech, which is group defamation. And I also believe that we need to regulate algorithms in the age of hate.
I think Simon's actually made a really great point that we've skimmed over, is that while there's legal elements to this discussion, what there really is underpinning is a huge cultural conversation. I really like the way that Simon's framed this, that there are bigger questions more than just free speech or hate speech. Are we in agreement on all these other things that we're just brushing over really quickly? And the law actually achieves very, very little when we have a culture that does not appreciate and exercise it well. When we just turn the law into a weapon as opposed to a tool which equally defends, uplifts, and protects individuals, not groups, we've lost sight of all rational, logical, legal thought. And there is no point in putting other caveats and clauses in because it'll all be weaponized.
Just want to make one last point. The Law Commission's Ia Tangata report was about should 3% of the population have explicit human rights in the Human Rights Act. It wasn't about free speech.
The Ia Tangata report, Paul is saying, is created specifically with 3%. There's 97% other of people who are not represented there, and that it infringes on their freedom of conscience, religion, their right to speech.
Simon, you said before we needed to think about the quality of speech. How would you rate today?
B+.
Come on.
Now, look, if I can have a shot at answering the question, if we're going to have absolute free speech, then we will have hate speech. So you can't have complete free speech without hate speech. However, I believe we can have a mature, free, constructive, democratic conversation without people saying hateful things about others and without people inciting violence. And in particular, we can have, I believe, a perfectly mature, free, democratic conversation without people saying abusive things or denying the identities of people who are trans or non-binary and so on. I just don't see that as particularly valuable speech and the kind that any of us should want to protect.
Agreed.
Simon, thank you so much, Professor Simon Keller, Paul Thistol and Nathan Seuli. Thank you all so very much. Gosh, you've given us a lot to think about. And it's been fantastic. We so appreciate you all coming onto The Elephant. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. Thoughts, brother?
Yeah, I'd just like to say I hate the way you always ask me first.
Well, it's your free speech. I'll accept it.
I don't know. I felt like I was in a ping pong match. I thought, oh, you've got a point. Yeah, you've got a point. Yeah, you've got a point. You've got a point. Oh, so does Simon. But I actually liked what Simon said, which was he talked about the quality of speech, and maybe that's some area that we need to lift our game a bit and protect the vulnerable. But I think through all this, we have to think that there is freedom of speech, but there is also the freedom not to listen if you don't want to.
And not to be freedom not to be an idiot, please, would be another one. But I mean, Paul, I thought was great. Like, I really admire where he's coming from. Having said that, listening to Nathan, I was thinking, you know, that's what we're trying to do on The Elephant, is to provide a platform where people can speak and say what they think, and we attempt to listen, and we encourage people to come and say what they think without being deliberately offensive. And so that's what we, you know, I think the vibe that we're trying to bring to this is ideally the vibe that we would bring to free speech in our country. And so I feel like it is very difficult to put a penalty upon somebody and to figure out how to penalise someone for saying what they really think.
And yet there are real harms.
And there are absolutely...
I mean, and the Christchurch mosque shootings is a classic example of that. At some stage, we need to work out a way to protect people from going through that.
How do you do that, though? That's the whole point of this discussion. How do you do that? Like, would you expand the law and protections for people? And if you would, how would you do that?
See that? I just chose not to listen.
Yeah, exactly. It's so difficult. And that's why I'm kind of like thinking, jeepers, I think Nathan might have the right approach here. And in fact, what that means is that all three of our guests had the right approach, which was ultimately to say we need to have quality of speech.
I mean, free speech it can be tough, it can be difficult, but at some stage, I think we've lost the ability to listen to the other side.
Yeah.
And that's maybe what we need to get back.
Gosh, it's such a difficult one, isn't it, everyone? Keen to hear your thoughts on this. That is the elephant for this week. Remember, you can catch us on the New Zealand Herald homepage, YouTube, iHeart, and your favourite social media platforms.
The elephant in the room. Time to talk.
Until next time, ngā mihi e te whānau, mauri ora.